So let's talk about vision. In the sense of like a visionary. What is vision? I think that um, there are two fundamental types of vision that are very difficult to recognize as legitimate at the same time. Like different, the same person won't typically recognize both types as legitimate. There are illegitimate and legitimate visions, I guess. And so there's religious revelation, which is experienced by a saint or a prophet, and then there is genius, which unfolds as art or science, or enterprise or politics, perhaps. And genius is the sort of mode of vision intrinsic to modernity, sort of post the scientific revolution and the industrial revolution. So, um, arc work can in part be described as an attempt to find a dialectical resolution between these two types of vision. So somehow it would be a constellation of humanist enterprises that are devoted explicitly to God and to building the kingdom of heaven explicitly. Now there are a lot of problems with this idea. Like it sounds absurd, and part of that is because these types of visions are intrinsically very different. There's actually a Kierkegaard essay about this. Um, like the religious vision is oriented towards a paradox. They both are oriented towards paradoxes, but the religious vision is oriented towards an eternal paradox, something like love your neighbor, which like culture can never really catch up to. Whereas genius typically involves sort of seeing ahead of the curve, um, and it seems what you discover, like Cantor and the infinite or something, seems paradoxical. People resist, but then the next generation applauds you for it, and there's some sort of implicit notion of progress in the genius mode of vision, whereas that's not necessarily the case for religious vision, or it really explicitly tends not to be. Um, and the reason that it's so hard to combine these two things is that the whole point of humanist genius vision is for these modes of activity to not be constrained by the idea of God, right? I mean, the Renaissance was the liberation of science and art from the constraints of religion. That was almost the whole point. Um, Nevertheless, I don't think that the current constellation of visionary activities is serving us very well in the current mode that it's sort of being pursued, because um, you know the other thing that happened with humanism and the Renaissance was the birth of capitalism. And you have to remember that the reason that um, that the sort of genius progress of these disciplines is endorsed and loved is because it serves the expansion of exchange value and productivity. It's because of the market, and these forms. It's not that they're not serving any god. They're just not serving um, the Abrahamic God or the Christian God. They're serving the God of capital. And um, I think that there's a big problem with the fact that they aren't really um, that the humanities, or the, I guess science isn't really a humanity, but the enterprises that humans sort of endorse are, they're not since they're not coordinated. There's no sort of total picture of what, um, where we're headed or something, and so um, there's no real agency being exercised over world history, and there's an implicit understanding, an implicit belief that any discovery is good, or any, new uh, form of art, whatever. Like all these things, we just understand them to be good and valuable, but that may well actually be an ideological mystification, because they're sort of feeding a process. I mean, capital isn't like the worst thing exactly. It's just a process that, ultimately is undermining human agency. I mean, I'm kind of the view that it's sort of a necessary precondition for communism or something like that. But um, so so that, that's a problem with humanist vision. And then there's you find these traditionalists, or sort of religious people, who think that science and science was this kind of Promethean, or like Icarus kind of mistake, and that modern art is decadent and so on, and that the only legitimate type of vision actually is, the religious type, and that the world needs to turn back and become more pious. And I don't think that at all. I think that uh, that the varieties that have been contributed by art and science and politics and enterprise, are beautiful, wonderful things. And there's something really important is being unleashed, and we need to find a way to kind of consolidate and capture it, or something like that. But if you turn away from modernity, you turn away from any modern concept of social justice, and there's no need for theism to be conservative and bigoted, though I think because there's so much shame around theism in kind of progressive circles, it's almost forced into this other corner or whatever. Um, so anyway, so what Haelegenic vision is a type of sort of visionary activity that, is seeking to fulfill the potential of humanity with a kind of, hypothetical notion of heaven in mind, and uses as its means, the humanities as we understand them, in all their sort of transgressive, dangerous glory. And that's a major part of what arc work is supposed to be. And really, the ultimate idea is to try and actually liberate the sciences and arts from the market. Like liberate them as such. Like I don't think that there's any sense these days in trying to tune out, or just turn away from the market, but in your own practice or something. But I think it's very interesting and kind of exciting even to imagine, uh, f- finding a coordination between human activities, maybe even schematizing them differently. Or actually, that's exactly what I think, needs to happen, so that they can kind of, fuel one another with their own feedback, and not be related to exchange value in the market at all. So it's like a little sort of seed of a heavenly new mode of production.